Chapter 14. Well-Kept Secret. Quick as a flash, Ned sidestepped the flying scimitar, which missed him by an inch. It embedded itself in the wall near the front door. "Wow!" he cried out. "What's going on here? Some welcome." "Thank goodness you're all right," said Nancy. "I wish I knew what's going on." At that moment, they heard a key turn in the front door lock, and they both stiffened. Was the burglar returning? Ned got ready to jump him, and Nancy moved away. To their relief, the door was opened by Hannah Gruen. She looked in surprise at the positions of Nancy and Ned. Then she spotted the scimitar protruding from the wall. "Oh my goodness," she said. "Where did that thing come from?" "It was rolled up in the rug," Nancy replied. "Hannah, did you by any chance bring the rug down here?" "No, I didn't. I thought we had agreed to hide it in your closet." "We did," Nancy said. "So apparently the burglar brought it down. But how did he know where we had hidden the rug?" Hannah interposed. "And assuming it was the same intruder, why didn't he take the rug when he had the chance?" "Can't answer either of your questions," Ned replied. "But one thing's sure. Eric isn't our man," Nancy finished Ned's sentence. Briefly, they explained to Hannah that Eric was at work when the intruder came to the Drew house. As Hannah started to take the scimitar from the wall, Nancy suggested that they not touch it. "It may have fingerprints useful to the police," she said. Ned chuckled. "You sure have been contacting the police lately," he teased, and told how he and Nancy had captured the robber down at the Bedford carpet factory. Hannah was astounded, but shook her head resignedly. "Ned," she said, "you should have learned by this time that adventure comes Nancy's way even when she's not looking for it." "That's one reason it's so interesting to be with her," he replied. Nancy and Hannah made a search of the house but found nothing missing. The young detective headed for the phone to call her friend Chief McGinnis. The two discussed the whole case for some time. He said to leave the scimitar where it was until a couple of his men could pick it up. "They're pretty busy right now," he said. "It'll probably be near supper time before anyone comes." Meanwhile, Ned and Hannah had started to examine the rug to see if it had been damaged. Fortunately, it had not been. When Nancy joined them, he said, "Maybe it's an old Turkish custom to leave a scimitar as a warning." Mrs. Gruen looked worried and remarked, "It gives me the creeps to think that somebody can get into this house despite all of our excellent locks." The three went all around the place, checking windows and doors, and finally concluded that probably the burglar on his second trip had come in through the front door. Suddenly, Nancy looked around and said, "Hannah, where's Togo?" "I took him to the dog beauty parlor," the housekeeper said. She glanced at her watch and added, "It's about time to pick up our little dog." "I'd do it," Ned said, "but I must leave now to keep my appointment." "Thanks, Ned, for coming along today," Nancy said. "You know I don't mind," he replied. "I'll let you know if I make my sale." Nancy wished him luck, then drove downtown to get the dog. He frisked about, not only glad to see her, but acting as if he were proud of his new appearance. He had been pedicured, shampooed, and his coat brushed until it shone. "You're beautiful," Nancy said, scooping Togo up in her arms. She carried him to the car and drove home. No sooner had Togo bounded into the living room than he spied the scimitar in the wall. He growled at it loudly, then jumped up and knocked it down. "Oh!" Nancy cried out. "Get away! You'll cut yourself!" She picked up the scimitar and laid it on top of the piano. Then Nancy realized what she had done. Her own fingerprints might have blotted out those the burglar may have left. "Oh, Togo, sometimes you're good and sometimes you cause a lot of trouble." The terrier merely looked at Nancy and wagged his tail. "You're hopeless," she told the dog. The phone rang and Nancy went into the hall to answer it. To her amazement and delight, Aisha was calling. "Nancy, will you ever forgive me?" the girl said. "I was so rude to you this morning. I am extremely sorry." "Of course," Nancy replied. "I figured you knew some secret in connection with the mannequin that you didn't want to tell me." "That is true," said Aisha. "But I do want to talk to you. I am alone. My aunt and uncle just went out and will be gone for a while. Could you and your friend come?" Nancy said that Ned had already left, but she would be glad to drive over. She told Hannah where she was going and went out the door, her mind in a whirl. What was the Turkish girl going to tell her? Did she know the whereabouts of the mannequin? Would she reveal more about Farouk? Nancy finally reached Aisha's street, parked her convertible, and went up the walk to the porch steps. The Turkish girl opened the door before Nancy had a chance to ring. Impulsively, she put an arm around Nancy as they walked into the living room. The girls sat down and Aisha began her story. "As I told you, I know where Farouk's mannequin is, but you'll never find her unless Farouk himself tells you where she is." "Why not?" Nancy asked, bewildered. She wondered why Farouk would have asked her father to bring the mannequin to Turkey if he would not reveal where she was. Aisha said that he had made her promise she would not reveal the secret. "I can't understand why," Nancy told her quite frankly. "By keeping it a secret, it sounds as if there was something dishonest about the whole thing." Aisha looked a little frightened to hear this. "I assure you there was nothing dishonest about the mannequin, or about Farouk wanting to keep her whereabouts a secret." She changed the subject. "Nancy, tell me why you want to find the mannequin." "I suppose I've been as mysterious about this whole thing as you," the young detective replied, laughing. Nancy divulged the story of the rug, all the time watching Aisha's face closely. The girl's expression kept changing from one of happiness to one of puzzlement. She made no comment even when Nancy finished. "Would you like to see the rug?" the young detective asked her. "Very much." "Then let's go over to my house. Perhaps you can find more words or symbols in it that will reveal the entire message." As soon as they reached the house, Nancy introduced Aisha to Hannah. Then the two girls sat down to study the rug. Aisha was intrigued by all that Nancy and her friends had found so far. Industriously, they continued to examine the border. Minutes went by. Then the Turkish girl exclaimed that she had found something. She pointed it out to Nancy. "Look there among the leaves!" Aisha exclaimed. Woven in among them was a fancy and unusual-looking object. "It's a shoe shine stand," Aisha explained. "I've never seen one like it," Nancy remarked. "They are fairly common in Istanbul," the Turkish girl went on. "I cannot figure out why Farouk added this to the border. Nancy, can you guess?" "Not right now. Surely a rug dealer wouldn't be shining shoes," she declared. "But there's another angle I must investigate." In reply to Aisha's puzzled frown, Nancy added that when it was possible she would try to trace Farouk through rug shops in Istanbul. "Oh, you're marvelous!" her friend exclaimed. "Maybe there's another symbol that will be more of a clue," Nancy said. The two girls searched diligently but found nothing more. They decided to rest and have a cool drink. While sipping cherry soda, Nancy told her visitor about the burglar's intrusions and the scimitar and showed it to her. The Turkish girl shivered a little. "That is horrible!" she cried out. "One thing is certain," Nancy said. "Eric didn't leave it, and if the man who did is the one who was here before, then Eric is innocent. I was sure I had identified him as the burglar. I didn't want to tell you this before, but during the time someone sneaked in here today, he was at work and talking with Ned and me. The burglar that we suspect," Nancy went on, "is a man who looks very much like Eric, is a super-duper locksmith, and wears a gold filigree bracelet with turquoise in it." Aisha said she knew no one like that, and now she must leave. "I'll take the bus home," she said. "I want to stop off and do a little shopping." Nancy, I am so glad to be friends with you, and truly I wish I could tell you where the mannequin is, but I cannot break a promise until I receive permission." "I understand," said Nancy. Aisha had been gone only a few minutes when 2 policemen arrived. Nancy showed them the scimitar and said they would find her fingerprints on it as well as those of the intruder. One of the officers remarked, "This is a cheap handmade scimitar, but that might make it easier to find the person who left it than if it were an imported, expensive one." He took a cloth bag from his pocket and slipped the scimitar into it. Then he and his companion went off. Nancy, her mind full of many things, began to open her mail, which had been delivered earlier in the day. To her delight, the travel brochure which Mr. Simpson had promised to send was among her letters. She glanced at the itinerary excitedly, then curled up in a living-room chair to open the rest of the mail. There was nothing interesting, and she fell to daydreaming about the mystery. The front doorbell rang twice, but Nancy did not seem to hear it. Hannah answered and accepted 2 packages from delivery men. The bell rang a 3rd time, and once more Mrs. Gruen came into the front hall. She glanced into the living room and looked at Nancy, thinking she had perhaps fallen asleep. But the young detective was staring up at the ceiling and counting on her fingers. Hannah shook her head and went on. She opened the front door, and Bess and George came in. Seeing their friend in the living room, they walked in. Nancy came out of her reverie. "Hi," she said, uncurling herself. "Oh, girls, I've been working and working on the mystery, and now I think I've solved part of it." "You have?" the cousins said. Nancy smiled and looked directly at the 2 of them. "Yes, but I'll have to go to Istanbul to prove it. Could you 2 go with me?" End of chapter 14.